Hello everyone, welcome to the PinkUn.com Facebook page. I'm Michael Bailey, here's David Fraser, fresh from Colney following Norwich City's pre-match press conference, ahead of their return after the international duty. Got to be honest, it feels like ages.
It does feel that
we've been involved in this. I've had a week off. Have you had a week off?
Not during the international break, but just before. But I think for a lot of fans, it's been for there hasn't been a home game for a while, has there? Not everyone went to the Charlton game, so for some people, it's been 3.5 weeks since the QPR game.
Nuts. And Mr. Davitt is currently enjoying himself a little break as well, so why not? But fortunately, us two got to taking Colney this afternoon. I hate to say that the headline was a massive downpour during Daniel Farke's press conference, but it really did hammer it down, and we almost struggled to hear him at one point. But we got updates on team news and of course ahead of the game. If you want to send us some comments, we'll try and interview them. We've probably got about 15 minutes that we'll be on for, so send us your questions, comments in, tell us where you're watching from as well, because it's always good to know. Team news first. DF, do you want to or DDF? Do you want to run through some of that for us?
Yeah, I think I just about heard it all above the rain. I seriously considered suggesting postponing the press conference for a few minutes, but we battled through. Tim Close is the big one. He is available. The 2 weeks has benefited him as we expected, and he is available for tomorrow, as is Cameron Jerome. He has trained for the last 6 days, I think that Daniel Farke said, so the groin problem that he's had is gone. He also said Ivo Pinto is now 100%. Obviously he has been playing but has had a hamstring problem, hasn't he, which has troubled him a little bit, so that the break has benefited him. Grant Hanley is involved, but whether he'll start seems a bit unlikely. He was in for training yesterday, but it was only a light session because he played for Scotland on Monday night, so it's quite a rapid turnaround for him. Only just arrived at the club, and he trained fully today, but clearly he's got to get on message, as it were, isn't he?
He has, yeah, which I find a really interesting thing, because as you said, he hasn't spent a lot of time at the club. We've got to speak to Grant Hanley as well as Daniel Farke today. I mean, whether it was us asking more, but Daniel seemed more forthcoming in terms of Tim. And clearly he's had a lot of more time to work with Tim. Tim got some of pre-season, he's still been around the place, and Tim's been on the verge of getting back to full fitness in the last few weeks. So probably the idea of throwing Tim in on Saturday compared to, say, Grant, who's literally only come in, only had a few days, and you have got... You told me 5 games in the next 2 weeks. Tim and Grant are both going to get their games basically over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, when Daniel arrived, I'm sure he would have been very pleased to see Tim here. A fellow German speaker, a player that he'll know very well from his time in Wolfsburg, and then the Cambridge lump striker Ikpeazu, I can't remember his first name, but he absolutely wiped Tim out in that pre-season game. Completely ridiculous tackle, and he hurt his leg, and obviously he's now been gone for 2 months, nearly 2 months. So but the fact that obviously going into the transfer window we were all wondering, would Tim still be here at the end of it? The injury has obviously guaranteed that, but the fact that he is here means he's going to have a big part to play. And he said he didn't want to big up Tim too much, did he? Because he wants Tim to prove himself on the pitch. But equally, he was very keen to stress that he's an experienced player, and he sees him amongst what you could almost say as the leadership group, with Naismith, Martin, Jerome, those sort of senior players who, once they're on the pitch, he expects them to lead the younger guys.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with Tim, isn't it? Because, and I think I asked Daniel this, Tim is almost coming up as the saviour at the moment, this great centre-back Norwich are going to be able to call upon. Yet, we were all there last season. We saw what happened at places like Burton, and Tim did really struggle. I guess what we're hoping for is that he has adapted and is ahead of the curve, compared to Marcel Franke and Christoph Zimmermann, ultimately.
That's all we can hope, really, isn't it? I mean, the Birmingham game last season was when he scored and headbutted the corner flag, so that would be a nice...
have another one of those.
A nice repeat of that, yeah quite. We all know what Tim's capable of. I mean, when he first arrived here, he was superb, wasn't he? Until he got that injury at Crystal Palace, which, effectively was one of the nails in Norwich's coffin that season. So if he can hit those levels again, then he should be if not then one of the best defenders in the Championship. So obviously that is piling a bit of pressure on him, given that he's coming into a team who've just conceded 4 goals in successive games. But I think whether you're going to see a 3 at the back or a 2 at the back, and obviously Daniel wasn't going to tell us which that was going to be, you would expect him closer to be starting when he's fully fit.
Well, we've had a few questions about it, actually. Let's have a look from Eddie M. Pam. Hello there, Eddie. Also, John Miesages. Still not sure how to pronounce your surname. Sorry, John. We'll just call you John M from now.
Can he spell it phonetically?
Yeah, phonetic spelling, please, John. Yeah. Mainly questions. Will Klose start? How much of an impact on the squad is Grant Hanley signing, which we'll get onto in a moment? Can you see Klose and Hanley as starting centre backs? What do you think for Birmingham? Because personally, I think it'll be a 3. I think we'll probably have Franke, Klose, and Martin. Don't groan, people. But what do you think?
I can see your logic in that. I think I would go with Klose, Zimmerman and Franke personally at the moment, although I can see that the right side of a 3 does probably suit Russ best at the moment, because he's not really got the pace for a full-back anymore, let alone a wing-back, which obviously suits Ivo Pinto nicely. But I can see why Daniel would do that. I see tomorrow as Millwall should have been as well, to be perfectly honest, as getting back to basics. Just make sure you don't concede. That's this whole evolution, all the changes they're making. They've just got to stop conceding goals now. Then you can start building it. Then you can start worrying about who's scoring the goals and stuff like that. I'd take a 0-0 right now, to be honest, because that allows them to get things back on track. But and for that reason, I can see why you'd say Russ would probably be involved, just because of his experience.
Yeah, we did ask him about Daniel Farke. This is about what he wants from his side and how that evolution is going to manifest itself in the next few weeks, because it did seem to get a little bit theoretical at Millwall while they were roughly taken apart. And again, Daniel does speak very well, and clearly what he needs to do is have actions on the pitch that are backing up what he's saying, because if the gap grows between what he's saying and what's actually happening, we've all got an issue. But I found it very interesting how he was talking about how he wants the players to, defend like their lives are relying on it, and things like that, and that it's not about the possession. He actually effectively said it's not really about the possession, but it's about what you're doing in the key moments and other areas, and that defensive ability.
Well, it was good to hear him talk about the fact that it's not just the back line, and that the whole team has to defend, and as he put it, it's about putting your life on the line to defend your goal. And that's all well and good, and it sounds great, and it's exactly what you want the head coach to be saying ahead of a game. But that should have been the case at Millwall, and we all know full well that it wasn't. They underestimated Millwall. Whatever anyone tells me, they turned up there thinking that they were good enough to beat them, and they weren't. They were overwhelmed on the day. So that should have already been the case. But the only thing we can hope now is that horrendous day at Millwall has reinforced the point, and that there is now absolutely no wriggle room for the players to do anything but do that, or they're going to be out of the team and out of the club before too long, because you can't continue at that rate.
John M, it did start off by saying morning in the Pacific, which sounds lovely, John, by the way. He also says that, people make a messy guess of how to say my name. He hasn't actually added any kind of phonetic spelling of your name, John, so you obviously quite like it.
You have to use initials for him in the future.
It'll still be
John.
John M. So that's all good stuff. Steve Wells is in touch with will Wes start? There was obviously a question mark over Wes's groin injury, but actually, effectively, everyone else is fit. Cameron Jerome's going to feature, as you mentioned, and there didn't seem to be any real hang-ups from the international break.
No, he was saying it's a nice position to be in. This is the strongest squad he's had so far, and he said that he's had 21 or 23 players to train with today, so that's obviously in one way a challenging position for a coach, because you've got difficult selection decisions to make, but in another way it's nice because he's got so much, hopefully, quality available to him. Whether Wes is up to playing 2 games in 5 days, I'm sure he could manage an hour if needed. Whether he can play at the top of his game, I think it's only down to them that can judge that, isn't it? Seeing him in training, seeing if he is tired, because he's 35. He's got to manage his body. There's no doubt about it. But he played 56 minutes, I think, for Ireland. So it's not like he's gone into extra time in a cup match or anything, is it?
I love Wes, and I love how important it is. I just shudder a little bit when people are so reliant on Wes starting, because this needs squad as good as Wes is. It's a shame because Alex Pritchard isn't fit. If Alex Pritchard was fit, it would obviously be a very different story indeed. Sue Cassidy, I think the bench suits Russ better. #Bants. Sure, you're not the only one, Sue.
I just think at the moment you don't want that booing situation being prevalent, do you? You don't want to give people the opportunity to boo him, and I to be honest, I think it's maybe reached a point now where at Carrow Road, if people booed him, that some people may well shout those people down and say, pack it in, let's get behind people, because I think it's reached the tipping point where people really don't like it now. So that would be interesting to see what happens if he does stop.
If you want to go and boo a load of people, go down to court. That's what I would suggest.
I like that.
But moving on, let's get on Grant Hanley, shall we? A couple of people asking about him. I mean, as I said, I think it'll take a bit of time for him to come in. And we did speak to Grant, and typical, like most Scottish players I've tended to interview, they're sometimes a little bit short with the words. But it was interesting how he didn't really want to go into. Well, it was your question, wasn't it, about the style of play and how he felt he would have to adapt to that, which is kind of, we do it all the time, so that's that.
Yeah, I think he probably knew that question was coming and maybe had thought about a shorter answer, because I think most people looking at it think, well, is he a natural fit for a possession style or a three at the back? He's a bit more of a classic Championship defender. He's more of a Malky Mackay, isn't he, than a Marcel Franke. He's not gonna be a sort of cultured centre back who's gonna spray it about. Well, from what we've seen of him so far in his career, he's 25, so I guess he could still learn a few new tricks, and maybe that was kind of where he was coming from, in that he said that it's his job to fit in with what Daniel Farke wants. So that's true to an extent, but equally Farke's got to use his attributes to so that he fits into the team properly. Otherwise he's going to look like a fish out of water, isn't he? If you tell him to pass it along the back, then he's going to look a bit silly. You've bought him because he's a big guy, he's going to get rid of the ball, and if you, as we have sort of seen with Christoph Zimmermann, when he plays in the centre of a three, he has played quite a limited role, hasn't he? It's far easier for the guy in the middle than the guys either side of him, because it's just get rid. It's almost like a...
Well, you've got two options most of the time either side of you as well.
Yeah, you either play that short pass or you just get rid of it, and I guess that will suit Hanley, and to start with, that's what they'll do.
I know what footballers are like. I think there's a degree of, don't ask me if I can't play football properly because I'm a defender and I'm just going to nut brick walls.
Yeah, but you have to have the realisation of your abilities, don't you?
That's exactly the balancing act. John's been back on touch. The clue was actually in the last comment. Messy guess is apparently how it's a messy guess.
Oh, all right.
So there we go, John. Messy guess. So we'll take that. Thank you very much. What else have we got here? Stephen Tilney's asking about James' husband. He does also say Mr. Farke speaks very well, but sadly the team on the pitch seem to be doing the opposite of what he says and wants. Certainly a big disconnect in the last few weeks, and we'll see how that develops over the coming weeks, because as I said, I think that's a really important point. But he does mention what's going to happen with James' husband. James' husband did the Norwich City Fans Social Club Forum in midweek with James Maddison and Christoph Zimmermann, and spoke well, James, and it's an interesting one, because I think some people maybe do forget that he is 23 years old. Mm-hmm. Didn't play a lot of football last year, and he admitted himself he's trying to adjust to this whole, playing twice a week regular football. We're obviously offering so much goodwill to the style changes and the management and how Norwich are going about this, yet that maybe in a way, because James' husband is English, he's played in the Championship before a little bit, there's we've seen him for 5 times and he's rubbish. and let's be clear here, he's not. It's been a difficult start, and I think he's had the brunt of Daniel Farke's annoyance at times behind the scenes as well, James.
Yeah, I'm not sure he helped himself too much with his interview after Millwall either. He was probably just a bit too frank. I mean,
which bits?
Well, when he was talking about we're playing this sort of fancy style of football, maybe we need to get away from that and get back to basics, I thought that was a slightly odd thing to say. But we're all presuming that a three at the back with wing backs seems to be what fits this squad now, and it would seem to fit him better as well. And equally, if Marco Stiepermann's going to be his competition, he would see more of a left wing back than a left back as well. And it's the same with Ivo Pinto on the right. He suits a wing back role very, very well, doesn't he? So we'll probably see a flat 4-4-2 tomorrow after all the chat.
First time.
I think that will help James, and he just needs to keep playing games, doesn't he? I mean, The problem is I'm a bit perplexed by them letting Harry Toffolo out on loan to Doncaster. Whether he's ready or not, Marcus Stevenman isn't an out-and-out left-back or left-wing-back. He's obviously someone who's versatile and can play there. But it's kind of all your eggs in one basket with James Husband, isn't it? If he doesn't come good, if he has another 3 or 4 games where it's not happening for him, his confidence takes a further dip, then you're pretty limited on that left side. And I'm not sure what the answer would then be. The obvious one would have been to give Toffolo a chance now that he's fit again. But he's farmed out to Doncaster, and we don't really know what the future's going to hold for him. So I think it's in the best interest of everyone involved with Norwich City that James gets some confidence in him, finds his feet, and starts to look the £1 million player, which is what he is, or was what he was bought for anyway.
David Wells, we did have a question earlier about Alex Pritchard because he did come up a moment ago. David Wells says he was talking to Alex Pritchard in the Apple Store. Told me his injury is coming along lovely and hopefully he'll be back in training in November. Well, that would be nice. It will, of course, take a bit of time for when he's back in training to being out on the pitch. But yeah, fingers crossed. I wonder what he was buying in the Apple Store.
Something expensive, I would imagine.
Something expensive. Well, it's not going to be cheap, is it, in the Apple Store, let's say. Liam Jensen, hello there. Liam, he asks, do you believe Jamal Lewis will claim a starting berth over Husband when he returns? Now, the unfortunate thing with Jamal Lewis is that he did look the part during pre-season, which, as we know, we can't judge anything on. We haven't had a chance to look at him in proper, fully competitive mode, and I do feel he is a player who could really step on. I think there's quite a high hopes for him at City as well. So certainly, come the new year, it'll be interesting to see how Jamal does.
Well, if he hadn't got injured, he'd have had first-team chances. There's no doubt about it, because Husband hasn't hit the levels that were expected of him. And as I just said, Marcus Stevenman wasn't necessarily brought in as a left-back, was he? That's a position he can play. I'm still kind of intrigued to see where Marco will settle down, really, because he doesn't look particularly disciplined for any position from what I've seen so far, but there's clearly ability there, isn't there? He's clearly got something about him. I'm just not quite sure where his Norwich career is heading at the moment. As far as, I saw Jamal in the FA Youth Cup run a couple of years ago when they made it to the 6th round and went to Manchester City, and they got knocked out that night against the multi-million-pound talent in their own academy stadium. They only lost 2-0 that night, and Jamal was Norwich's best player. And he, in pre-season this year, he clearly had filled out. He's a tall lad. He looks like he could handle himself. So when he is fit again, if James Husband isn't hitting his straps by then, which he certainly has got to have improved at least, then that chance is still there for him. But still, you've got Harry Toffolo in the mix. He's got two years of senior experience ahead of Jamal. Jamal's not been out on a loan like Harry has to 4 League One clubs, a spell in the Championship as well. So that seems a little bit odd from an academy point of view to just sort of say, "Oh, well done on getting all that experience. Off you go again. We're just going to skip you out because we think he's a bit better." So yeah, I think it's funny because last year there was left back issues as well, wasn't there? When Brady and Olsen were gone, obviously Dykes did come in eventually, but there was a time when Russell Martin had to play left back, didn't he? And Stephen Whittaker was playing left back, and it's just become a little bit of a problem position, isn't it? Awkward
ones finding a decent left back, but there we go. We'll see how James gets on. Right, last few minutes. So if there's any questions, get them into us, please. But let's rattle through these. Tom Hill asks, is Cameron Jerome going to come back in? Cam is fit. Nelson surely going to start on Saturday.
Got to, yeah. Scored another goal when on international. I know it was only against the Faroes and it was put on a plate for him, but he still put it away nicely, and he's in great form. What is it, 5 goals in 7 games now, something like that. So yeah, it's got to be Nelson for me and Cam on the bench.
Yeah, and I don't think Daniel Farke is any dissimilar to that thinking, really. I think the only times that Nelson hasn't started when it's been a straight selection issue was Fulham, yeah. Which was after the back of pre-season. The rest, I think, has been other circumstances or him physically not being fit. So that's that, really, as far as I'm concerned. John Messigues, one more from him. He says, have your season predictions changed after our start? I think I had us down as scraping into the top 6. I can't see that happening at the moment. So, yeah, I would say mid-table.
I said 8th, so I thought they were just going to be just short of the playoffs, and to be honest, I take that now. That would be a pretty decent bit of progress from Daniel Farke, really. But there is loads of time to go. Liam Jensen, does our lack of depth up front concern you? We had that conversation. I know it came up quite a bit during the last phase of the transfer window.
Norwich have obviously got Nelson and Cam, yet some people feel that having Marley and Josh as backup isn't really the same.
The thing that I keep thinking that people keep overlooking Stephen Naismith as well. I mean, he played a lot in the Premier League as a striker. I know we've seen him as a support striker, and maybe his legs are slowing down, and he hasn't really performed a great deal. But I think he his sort of tenacious style, you could stick him up front in a game, and he'll do you a decent job. And we know he can finish. The goal he scored against Liverpool on his debut proved that. Marley equally, he's got ability. At Barnsley, he liked to run in behind. A Barnsley fan described him to me as almost a bit Jamie Vardy-esque in that he had pace and liked to get in behind the shoulder or run on off the shoulder of the last defender. That doesn't necessarily seem to fit with the style that Norwich are playing at the moment, but perhaps they could adapt to that if needs be.
I'd like to think so.
And I suppose the thing to add to that is that I saw the two young lads in midweek in the friendly for the under-23s at Lowestoft, Pierre Foncu and Tristan Abrahams, and in an emergency situation, one of them Foncu presumably could end up on the bench, but they both look pretty raw. But Abrahams looked very one-footed, very left-footed, and looked like he was still sort of finding his feet really. But Foncu was buzzing around. He's very energetic. Didn't really get many chances, but that's what you're looking at next, and presumably those guys would be very hungry for a chance. So it's a shame for Carlton Morris perhaps, because he would have got chances as well if he'd have been here at the start of the season, and by all accounts he's looking good for Shrewsbury. So I'm not massively worried about it, unless both Cam and Nelson are both out, then obviously it becomes a worry.
Birmingham are going to be something of an unknown quantity tomorrow. 14 changes, and I think even Daniel Farke admitted, what they come up with now, given that Harry Redknapp has made all those changes, will be interesting. So we'll see what we get. Once again, it's probably not the best time. Is it either the idea that they haven't quite gelled together and they won't be ready, or they're all going to be so full of enthusiasm for getting together and under Harry's grand plan that they might really be dangerous, and we obviously won't know until the game kicks off.
You quite often get that sort of adrenaline surge with debutants, don't you? So we all know how good Jota is. We've seen him play for Brentford. I really like him as a player, but clearly Norwich weren't in the running for a £6 million player. Daniel admitted that predicting the Birmingham team is going to be difficult, but he had a little stat tucked up his sleeve. Had a few tucked up his sleeve as normal, didn't he?
Likes a stat.
And he said that, what was it? They've only conceded 6 goals in their 5 league games. So that's half of what Norwich have conceded, but they've picked up 4 points as well. So he made the point that Harry Redknapp is a very, very experienced manager, and even though he has wanted to completely revolutionise that squad, he's still managed to keep a reasonably solid back line. So he thinks the big thing with Birmingham tomorrow is obviously they've got to not concede, but he also doesn't expect there to be loads of chances because he thinks they'll be well drilled.
0-0. Any chance of a 0-0? No.
I'm with you on a draw. I'm torn between 1-1 and 2-2 at the moment, but not sure.
John says, "Is it a must-win?" No, but it'd be pretty handy if they did win it.
Yeah. I said this in the car to you on the way back, didn't I? That on the way back from Colney, that ahead of Millwall, when we did our Facebook Live video from when the coaches were leaving at Carrow Road, I'd said you can accept losing at Millwall as long as the performance is right and there are encouraging signs. Clearly there weren't. It was about as bad as it could have got. If they were to lose 1-0, 2-1 to Birmingham, in the grand scheme of things, people can probably handle that as long as they can see encouraging signs and they can see that the grand plan is starting to come together. That's what you need to see. If not, there's just too many worries, aren't there?
Exactly. And finally, Liam Jensen asks, where do you see the club in 12 months? I don't know. Try asking about 12 weeks, because that would probably be easier to get together. I think we're done. Thank you all very much. Don't forget, PinkUn.com is your place for all the build-up, live coverage, and of course reaction and analysis with us two, and of course Paddy Davitt. PinkUn.com, and we will see you there tomorrow, I'm sure. Do you want to give a prediction, Dave, to sign this off? Go on.
I'm going to go 2-2. I think there will be more chances, because I just think both teams are still going to be finding their system.
I'm not. I'm just going to close my eyes and hope for the best. Hopefully have my head in my hands less than I did at the Den. Thank you very much, Dave. Thanks all for watching. We really appreciate it. And we will, of course, see you from here on in, and we'll see how it all goes tomorrow. Until then, goodbye. I'm now going to sign off.